I have the pleasure of introducing a longstanding C100 charter member, Marianne Wu. Marianne is the managing director of 40 North Ventures. She focuses on IoT, energy, smart cities, smart buildings, automotive, and industrial applications of data. Prior to 40 North, she served as the president of GBatteries, where she took on energy and IoT investing. As I mentioned, she's a C100 charter member. Those are our 100 plus members who uphold the charter of C100, volunteer their time as she's doing now to mentor early stage founders. And she's located in the San Francisco Bay Area. So Marianne, thank you so much for generously contributing your time, your knowledge, your resources today. And I don't want to spend any more time on my end. I want to pass it over to you and allow you to introduce the great entrepreneurs that we're working with today.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Josh, and thanks for inviting me to be here. I'm really excited to be part of this, part of 48 Hours Today, and hosting this panel with these great CEOs and entrepreneurs. Just a little bit more about me, and I'll keep this short because Josh, you covered it all, or most of it. I am a Vancouver native with the UBC alumni. UBC undergrad and alumni, and actually worked in Ottawa for a few years as well. So kind of covered a few parts of Canada before I came down to the Valley for graduate school at Stanford, and then just stayed here since then. Josh, as you already mentioned, I was previously president of GBatteries and now am managing a new fund focused on many of the same themes, this idea of tech innovation for traditional industrial markets. And I think that actually sort of intersects deeply with the panel today, that part of the thesis behind 40 North Ventures, and I think maybe part of the thesis behind some of these companies as well, is that innovation, there are lots of new technologies and capabilities available now in the market today, but some of those industries have been really underserved by those capabilities, and that there's massive opportunity in those more traditional industries. So very much looking forward to this panel discussion today. We're joined by three great CEOs of three great Canadian companies, and they're all going to introduce their companies, themselves and their companies in a moment. It's probably worth pausing for a moment to just say that, you know, the deep tech and energy panel is pretty broad in its focus, just by the titling. I think you can hear that. And so we are going to be looking at a range of industries, from batteries to kind of grid, energy in the grid, as well as holographic and 3D displays. So pretty broad range there. But I think all of these companies are really united in the kind of bringing a new perspective and assistance perspective to problems that deal with some kind of physical element. So that's, I think, the thread that connects all of these companies, and looking forward to hearing each CEO talk about their specific industry and opportunity. So the format of this session will be that each of the CEOs will introduce themselves and their companies, and then I'll follow that with some kickoff questions to get us going. But as Josh already teed up, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and we'll get your questions worked in and addressed as part of the flow as well. So with that, I'm not going to spend any time on any of the CEO introductions because I want to give all the time to each of them. So with that, we'll kick it over to you, Kostya, to introduce yourself and GBatteries.
Perfect. Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Joshua. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this session. So I'll kick it off with saying a few words about myself, and then of course about GBatteries and what we are working on at GBatteries. I originally was born in Ukraine, immigrated to Canada, to Ottawa in '99 with my family, finished aerospace engineering here at Carleton University, did my grad studies there as well. And right off the grad studies, I started with the first tech startup as the spin-off from the Carleton University. So not to spend too much time on it, let's jump into GBatteries and what we are working on there. So at GBatteries, we started back in 2012. We started working with the hypothesis and thesis of being able to extend life of batteries. And we started in one of the basements in Canada. Many of you are Canadian here, so I usually joke here is that in the Bay Area, people start in the garage. In Canada, we start in the basement just because it's way too cold in the garage, as you may very well be aware, especially in Ottawa too. So, so we started working on this thesis. How can we extend life of batteries? Because we were frustrated that cell phones do not hold charge as well as it used to after a year of usage. Of course, it took us longer than we expected. It took us about 2 years to get to the first meaningful results. And that's how we paved our road to the Bay Area, where we took the meaningful results of extension of life. We raised our first seed round. We got into Y Combinator. We got $1 million of the first investment. As you, again, very well aware, $1 million don't get you far in the Bay Area. So we came back to Ottawa and we started working on commercializing this innovative tech. What we realized, unfortunately, is that people do not care about the life of battery until the battery is actually dead. So it's like selling your life insurance. So, okay, well, that's okay. What can we do with that? And unfortunately, people still did not believe in the future of electrical vehicles. Energy storage was really nowhere to be found. And consumer electronic manufacturers said, if you will extend life of my battery, who's going to line up in front of my store on an annual basis? So, okay, well, that doesn't help either. So we decided to still field test our tech. We decided to go in and build our own product. So what you can see on the slide at the left lower corner, actually, Josh, if you can go back on the slide, please. Yeah. So we built a battery bank for Apple MacBooks exclusively. So at the time, battery banks for cell phones became popular. So we built the battery bank for a laptop out of the box. Fantastic product. We embedded our tech in it. The product would live forever and ever and ever, as we would hoped for, which proved to be, but people did not care about the life of batteries yet again. They did not care about our tech and the product. They cared about the product and the freedom of having a battery bank for a laptop. So as a result, we sunk all of our energy in it. We decided to kill the product. We raised another seed round of $1.7 million this time around. And we carried on with the development of the technology, where we combined something what kills the battery with something what we understood how to preserve the life of battery. Something that kills the battery is actually speed of charge of the battery. So the faster you charge the battery, the faster the battery dies. And we decided to combine those together. We built the rocket ship hardware. We built a state-of-the-art laboratory where we've tested tens of different types of battery cells. There's probably tens of thousands of hours and cycles of demonstrating what we can do with our tech. Fast charge, long life of batteries. Where it led us to is having a lot of interest from car manufacturers. Our ultimate goal and our ultimate mission as the company is to enable electrical vehicles to charge as fast as it takes to fill up a tank of gas, is the goal to accelerate adoption of electrical vehicles from the monetary basis, of course, and of course from the climate perspective, as we believe that will do huge impact on the climate change. And as one of the recent demonstrations, what we have done on the next slide is just a picture, not the animation, but we took the small micromobility vehicle, electrical scooter that many of you have seen, of course, around the world. And usually it takes about 5 hours to charge. Granted, you can push it to about 45-minute charge conventional way, but that's kind of the limit of what you can do. We demonstrated an ability to charge it with less than 10 minutes to the same state of charge without damaging the battery cell. As our roadmap shows on the next slide, Joshua, please. What we're planning on doing now, we're planning on scaling from small micromobility vehicle out of the lab on a full battery pack for full electrical vehicles. And the goal is to do that in the next 2 years. Meanwhile, we have a lot of interest from small consumer electronics. In fact, we are in the negotiation phase with one of them, and micromobility vehicles potentially as well. So ultimate goal is to demonstrate it on cars by spring 2022. Meanwhile, to be able to deploy our tech in a smaller product market that would benefit from our tech. That in total wraps up the presentation. We are a team of 20 people. As I've mentioned before, we raised about $2.7 million USD as an equity round, and we leveraged about $7 million from Canadian non-dilutive funding. We are planning on going for Series A. 2020 did not result being the best year to go for it, so we're planning on doing that in the next year. We're always looking for the talent. We're always looking for potential collaborations with the industry. Thank you so much for your time, and looking forward to the Q&A.
Thank you, Kostya. And then next to Marc-André to introduce Ossiaco.
Hey, thanks, Marianne. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Kostya. To go along with Kostya, he solved the problem of trying to charge the battery as fast as a fuel gas of tank. So we at Ossiaco, we are in the business to try to find that energy as fast as possible to meet GBattery requirement. So that's why our mission is to deliver energy so you can live a life without compromise. Myself, I'm an electrical engineer working in the energy space for the last 20 years, and I got a law degree. So yes, I argue with myself all the time now, and it is mostly fine. About the name, we are Ossia company from an Ossia. And Ossia is just a musical term for a simpler alternative movement, which means we play instead of the original passage. And we think we're just that, an alternative way to energy compared to the worlds today. Josh, I think we can go. And the genesis of our company, it's simple. In the 90s, energy was so simple, right? We buy it from the grid and we got our gas from the car. Early 2000, subsidized rooftop solar selling to the grid was also quite simple at that time. It was mostly an economical play. But since the last 5 years, solar has risen to be in competition with grid energy and it's creating a new market. And soon after, thanks Tesla, people start to charge at home. 80% of cars are charged at home. And now with the grid under stress, we have blackouts, unfortunately, so people start to buy energy storage. And all of a sudden, energy has become way too complex for 140 million suburban homes in America. This is the world we're hitting, and we say energy should be simple. It's under everything. It's under our way of life. So we think that home energy unification was just inevitable, and climate change has just made it an emergency. So we worked very hard over the last 5 years. We're so proud. We just started shipping first unit last week to enable Decibel. It's the first home and EV power appliance that you connect your solar panels, your battery, your car, and it just make it simple. It just provide all the energy you need in your house. It's just the equivalent of the iPhone. We just integrate many different things from your life all together. And we have to build the hardware, the software. We're inspired by, the care for environment with Orchestrate OS. So over the last 6 months, honestly, it was from engineering to shipping. What we're the most proud of, it's what we're just about to launch into the market. We launched our first product that's like the one that is behind me. It's a very, very powerful product, but it's a bit expensive. It's for upscale home. But now we're just about to launch, I think, something that's going to really be energy for the masses. That's going to simplify everything. We're about to launch Decibel Essentials. It's basically a solar inverter, something that's going to transform your energy from your solar panel to your home. That is more affordable and more cost-effective than anything that exists on the market today. But the best part of it, out of the exact same unit, this is going to be also the world's only bidirectional charger combined with it. So you charge your car with the sun. That's really what is interesting. But in case of blackout, you can use your car to light up your house. And I think this is really what we're super proud of. And it came with our Orchestrate operating system and App Store, so the full home energy optimization out of it. And we're going to sell it at $1,500. We're starting shipping. We're finishing certification, as we're talking about, in Q2 2021. I think it's going to be something that's going to help energy for the masses, bringing all the energy need to fast charge a car. Now that GBattery is solving the problem on the other side. And this is really what we're doing. The company was funded 5 years ago with that concept of making energy more affordable, more personal, more simple to peoples. And after 5 years, we're about to make it. We're very happy for it. The challenge in front of us, we are in the middle of our Series A. So obviously, Series A being here in Montreal, cannot cross the borders in a hardware company. It's always a challenge in itself, but it's going well. At the same time, we are starting shipping the product. So it's a big transformation from engineering to shipping. So this is really where we are today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Marc-André. And then now over to you, Wally, to introduce yourself and Avalon.
Okay, great. Thanks, Marianne, and thanks, everyone. So I'm really excited to be here for C100. My name is Wally Haas, and I'm excited to tell you about Avalon Holographics. we make immersive holographic displays. So here's a thought experiment. How would you like to speak to someone as if they were completely real in front of you, even though they are thousands of miles away? Or watch live hockey or football as if you were at the stadium, but in your living room? That's the tech that we're making. Our tech can eventually go into monitors, TVs, and phones. It's a huge $150 billion end market. So to level set expectations about where we are, we're at the seed stage. We do have a working prototype that we're showing to customers and partners, but unusual for a seed stage company, we're also break even. So Josh, if you don't mind, next slide, please. So a bit of background on myself. I've got more than 25 years in optical telecom and semiconductor. This is my second startup after a successful exit with my first. That company, Avalon Microelectronics, was bootstrapped right from the beginning. We had a couple of world first optical telecom products, and we sold it to Intel in 2010 for almost 20 million. At Avalon, I worked very hard. I learned all the aspects of how to start and grow a company, and I wanted to do it again, but it needed to have three main elements. A problem that I personally experienced, a problem that myself and the team had some unique perspective or advantage in solving, and really a really inspiring vision, something that people would be excited to work on. And around that time, Iron Man 2 had come out, and there's a scene in there where Tony Stark is scanning his father's expo to be able to visualize his problem, which is the discovery of a new element. And that scene was really inspiring to me because I felt like I've had a similar style problem. I like to work on cars in my spare time. I've recently rebuilt a Jeep with my daughter as her first vehicle. There have been many times when I was trying to understand how a part worked within the system and just wishing that I could see how it all worked together. So because I was inspired by that Iron Man scene, I put the team together in 2015 and we looked into what it meant to make a holographic display. And what's amazing is that it turns out a lot of technologies from optical telecom and semiconductor can be applied to holographic. So perfect, there's a company I can start that satisfies all the elements I think I need to make it a success. We've been in stealth mode for the last 5 years, but we've just started to emerge, and I'm very pleased with the progress we've made. And also, just for your information, a holographic display is a type of light field display, which is probably a better technical term for what we do. So you might hear me and others use that term interchangeably. Next slide, Josh, if you don't mind. So to let you in on our progress, we've got a large format 29-inch holographic display that we've been showing to customers and partners. We've got 4 separate customer contracts totaling more than 3 million and expect to close another 6 million before the end of the year. One of the biggest needs for holographic displays in medical. Medical has already studied holography for performance and memory retention and found that there's a 30% performance improvement when using holography. And that might not seem like much, but that's the difference between you being well rested and you being up for 36 hours straight. We've been working with world leaders such as the Mazankowski Heart Institute and Johns Hopkins Medicine on how clinicians would use our display. And we've also been working with modality providers such as GE Healthcare, Philips, and Siemens. Another user of holographic displays is defense. The map table configuration allows for situational awareness and reduced cognitive load. And holography has proven to be as useful, if not more so, in defense applications as in medical applications. And further, there are many difficult problems that holography can help solve in industrial applications with computational fluid dynamics, spatial recognition, and CAD design. So as we look ahead to what our displays can do, our target early markets have an $80 million SAM, but as our technology progresses, we fairly quickly get to the $150 billion TAM of the entire display market. Our tech is specifically made to target the larger consumer audience over the long term, while still providing early mover advantage to our first customers. We've been able to leverage more than $5 million of my own investment, plus a friends and family round to bring us to this stage. We participate in R&D investment and tax credit programs in Canada that fund us to about $8 million a year, which allows us to break even this year and beyond. We've got an organic growth plan where we can create a stable business with no VC investment, but it's clear we can accelerate our technology and adoption of light fields if we were to raise a round. We're looking to raise 20 million. So thanks so much for listening. I'm happy to discuss further if you'd like follow-up.
Great. So thank you all for the introductions to your companies. I'm going to follow up with each of you on just so the kind of panel knows what's going on, the audience knows what's going on here. I'm going to follow up with each of you with a couple of directed questions on your companies, and then we'll try to generalize from there. I'm actually going to do this in reverse order right now because Wally, I don't know, you have the benefit of just having gone last, and maybe we can just keep the questions sort of consistent with you. So you are literally doing the stuff out of science fiction, right? That, these full sort of high fidelity displays, 3D displays come together. So this is in your own personal inspiration, and how that becomes sort of personal to you was super helpful for me, certainly, to hear your founding story. At the same time, lots of companies have tried this. This is sort of a wide open secret of, hey, wouldn't it be great if this existed? So what's Avalon doing that gives you a better, gives you a unique path into this future?
Sure, thanks. So my background in optical telecom and semiconductor has given us a bit of a unique perspective on bandwidth and information theory, and the physics and mechanics around how to make a holographic display. The theory, for sure, has been around for quite a while, but really, in order to make a good one, all of the technologies need to be used holistically together to make it work. And because the problem seems very daunting, there's lots of reasons to sort of cut it off and cut corners. And together, if you don't do the whole thing properly right from the beginning, then it really becomes a little more than a toy. So we've been working for a very long time, 5 years, more than 5 years, to make it a true light field display, what really you perceive as real. And that's the difference between us and pretty much everyone out there.
Yeah, no, super helpful. I think another thing that's kind of unusual about your story is that you are seed stage, but then you started with your profitable, and you have, customer contracts, right, with large enterprise customers. So can you talk a little bit about how you're navigating the sort of deep technology development that's going on the one hand with the light field display, and then the commercial path to market, and how you're getting revenue in concert with the development of the technology?
Sure, no problem. I can talk a little bit about that. So there's a program in Canada called the Industrial Technology Benefits Program. It's an offsets program for those that are in the sort of defense sector. And so because holographic displays have such a huge end application in defense, that there's large prime contractors who are happy to help fund our R&D, because eventually we'll be able to be in a situation where we can actually export our product. So that's where a lot of our offset contracts come from. However, we have brought it, our prototype, to the point where we can sell it and are selling it. But this prototype is really meant as a demonstrator. Our next generation display is really our production-based display.
Great. Thank you. Super helpful. And certainly, audience, if you have questions, put them in chat and we can circle back to them. From here, I think I'm going to go back to you, Kostya, and talk a little bit more about the batteries. I think there's some thematic linkages here that you have a lot of technology development to do as you go in. But again, the sort of user application is super clear. If you can charge your batteries as fast as filling a fuel tank, then who doesn't want that? So maybe start with, when people think about batteries, usually there's a long drawn out conversation about different kinds of chemistries. Are you this kind of chemistry or that, or what's the anode shape or what have you? So it's unusual. It's different than to be talking about software, and software as one of the key drivers around battery performance. Can you talk more about how software intersects with the battery performance?
Absolutely. And you're absolutely correct, Marianne, on the point that for the last probably over 100 years, when people were working on designing batteries, the core of the battery is actually material science, is the chemical composition of the batteries. But unfortunately, even when we came around to lithium-ion batteries, the first commercial product being introduced by Sony in 1991, although it was a new type of material, it still used the conventional CCCV charging approach that was used for that last 100 years. So it did not improve since then. There were lots of attempts. A lot of people have tried different types of pulse charging mechanisms, and with some actually positive outcomes, and surprising not being able to commercialize it either. I'd like to also put an accent on what Wally has mentioned, is that combination of various technologies actually helps to propel in one specific area. And that's what we looked into. We looked into what actually happens from the fundamentals of the batteries when we charge and discharge batteries, and how can we potentially enhance it. So just to give a bit more context here, as many of you may know that are familiar with batteries, when we charge batteries, the ions are flowing from one electrode to another, from cathode to anode, in some sort of electrolyte, whether it's liquid or solid. And as ions are flowing through, the faster when we start to charge batteries, and the faster we try to charge batteries, that those ions are starting to accelerate. And as they're starting to accelerate, they're starting to create a certain traffic inside of the battery cell that can be related to internal resistance or impedance of the battery cell. The analogy here that can be drawn is if you take a room full of people and ask everyone in that room to run through the same door all at the same time, we can only imagine what's going to happen. Essentially, we're going to crush ourselves, we're going to break the door, and so on and so forth. That's what we visualize what happens inside of the battery cell. And that's where we said, hey, can we utilize existing hardware and tools and capabilities to measure what is happening inside of the battery cell, to measure that internal resistance? And by the means of a software, charging protocols, adapt that charge and essentially organize those people in a room, in our case, ions, and ship them 5 at a time, 7 at a time, 2 at a time, to make sure that there's no pressure at that door, and enable all of those ions to have sufficient amount of time with nobody pushing at them from the back to intercalate with that anode. As a result, our hypothesis were that we would actually be able to achieve a better performance of the batteries with less irreversible damage or irreversible chemical reactions that would appear in that battery cell. So by means of a software that is able to analyze and control how the battery is being charged, we were able to enhance electrochemistry, material science of the batteries themselves. So hopefully that answers the question of where we are coming from and how software and smarts are enabling us to do that.
Yeah, no, Kostya, I think that's a super helpful description. I have to say that when I hear it, I think about boarding a plane, right? That it's sort of as one mechanism we all know that one way to solve the, hey, everybody get on a plane now problem is effectively by status. So if you're, you know, global services, you get to go on whenever you want, and then you order increasingly by zone or row or whatever. What I hear of when you describe that is that same kind of methodology that you sort of route people, or route electrons or ions accordingly. But how do you signal, or how do you control who goes when? Can you do a lay sort of description of that, or is that just too deep into the science?
What we're doing is we're measuring so-called internal resistance or impedance of the battery cell. And usually what happens when the traffic becomes too condensed, the ions are starting to pile up on top of one another, which is starting to increase internal resistance. And as a result, it's kind of a vicious circle where the more you push, the higher the internal resistance. The higher the internal resistance, more temperature is going up, the more damage is being created, not just because of the temperature, but of the pure electrochemical reactions where ions are just unable to intercalate. And because they're lithium ion ions, they, in the worst case scenario, starting to convert into actual metal, lithium plating on top of the surface of the electrode. And they either would kind of clog the pores of the battery, or they would grow into this dendrites that will grow from one side of the battery to another, may potentially short circuit. It's like a worst case scenario. So what we do is by measuring that traffic and that internal resistance, we are not necessarily, so we do not discriminate between the ions. So we do not choose which ions would go. We just take a bulk of ions and we determine that at that state, it's better not to go right now, because that, like, there's already traffic over there, so we don't.
Right. So just wait, just throttle. Yeah.
Let's just wait, or and that's exactly what you said, or just throttle back and then let more ions to go through. So do do not discriminate between the ions, but just make sure on the number of ions to get through that,
Right.
that pipe.
Makes tons of sense. Thank you, Kostya. And then Marc-André, over to you. So you're taking, I think, a little bit more of a systems approach in terms of bringing a number of elements together, but very much focused on electric vehicles as well. It's sort of similar to Kostya, a thought around electric vehicles. So why the vehicle? Why, why the inverter? Why kind of vehicle to grid technology? What is that, and why is it important?
Why vehicle to grid? First of all, what it is an electrical vehicle is just a vehicle. The only difference is the fuel itself. And when you think about it, electrical vehicle has a single trick that can be performed that a fossil fuel car cannot, is the capability to push back power if you need it. And our electrical vehicle has fairly large battery these days, and they're gonna get larger and larger. So because of the expensive costs of an electrical vehicles, leveraging that asset for homeowners, for people, is important because we need to front that important amount of money, even though over time, it's less expensive to own than a fossil fuel car. So vehicle to grid is that concept of taking the energy from the car and pushing it back to the home or to the grid. We can separate it in two. Some people say, oh, I can then monetize my energy from my car and sell it back to the grid. Yes, you can do that, but you're gonna need to buy it back when you're gonna want to ride around. So it's probably not the best efficient way to do it. Why it's so important is it's for blackout, it's for emergency. This is one of the key aspects. And the best way I can explain it to you, Marianne, is 2 years ago, we got a major windstorm in Montreal. I live outside of the city in the wood. So we got a big outages, and it was scary, it was dark, and I have young kids. My parents take care of my kids. I drive to my parents, take care of my kids, get back home around 9 p.m. It's scary in the wood. I arrive in my driveway. My daughter, Maya, says, Dad, I'm scared. And I say, it's okay, Maya, Pooh is waiting for you in the bed. It's going to be okay, right? And she stopped and she says, Dad, the box you're working on, it means that we're just going to plug the car inside to the box and the lights of the home going to just lit up. I said, that's right, Maya. I says, work hard, Daddy. We need it. And this is explaining what is vehicle to home, not vehicle to grid, not the monetizations, but this aspect of leveraging one of the second most important purchase in our life, that is usually our car. And the other aspect why it's so important to make it affordable is my son. He's 12 years old boy. So obviously when he opened the door, he doesn't say, oh, I'm not like Maya, I'm not scared, right? He's 12 years old boy, right? But my neighbor's got a generators, humming, puffing, smelling, okay, to power his home. And my boys look at me and says, Dad, we need to get rid of it. Work hard, Daddy, we need it. So that capability of leveraging this asset is fundamental. And up to now, honestly, it was mostly theoretical debates because of the price point of those technology, because of the modification we need to the car. So we bring out now a technology that is a price point that almost on par with a normal charger, that bring you solar charging, charge with the sun, without requiring much modification into the car or no modification to the car at all in some cars. And so making apps accessible. So I think this is why vehicle to grid is going to be important in our life. And I think it's going to also change the energy paradigm.
Yeah, no, super helpful. There's also a question on the chat to differentiate between vehicle to grid and vehicle to home. They're obviously very related concepts. Do you want to address that?
Absolutely. It's look the same, right? One is pushing the power from the car to the home. From a technology perspective, however, surprisingly, it's completely different. For the engineers in the rooms, one, if you're pushing back to the grid, you're going to be a current source. If you're vehicle to home and the grid is gone into blackout, you're going to be a voltage source. That's as technical as I'm going to go. So it's required two set of power electronics, a different approach. All the technology you heard today that has the capability to push back power, it's pushing back power to the grid. The concept here is monetizations. Peak shaving, it's to help the grid. Very few to none has the capability to do vehicle to home. That's mean pushing energy inside the home when the grid is out. And I think this is where the value is. This is why it's so difficult. So we patent the technology, the multi-level inverter technology around the world. We have those patents worldwide being granted that allow us to do both at the same time. So we can use your car to do peak shaving and avoiding very fairly costly electricity price, at peak time when you get back from the works. And then if you have a blackout, then you can use your car in blackout. So instead of buying $8,000 power walls, instead of buying a $4,000 Generac that's humming, puffing, smelling, and making carbon emissions, you just use your car in that context. And so it's looked the same. It's very different from a technology perspective. And the key ingredient here is to make it affordable and doing both at the same time. And this is what we're proud to say that we achieve. And I think this is the biggest accomplishment after 5 years in our case.
Yeah, no, it's really great. And it's interesting how many, or that multiple of you took inspiration from your families in terms of what challenge to tackle next.
Yeah.
All three of your companies are in a little bit complicated ecosystems, right? So for Marc-André, if you're going to take the vehicle battery, the vehicle manufacturers probably have a perspective on that, and certainly the utilities have a perspective on grid interconnect. Kostya, you're also sort of working towards charging large vehicle batteries, and so there's sort of some interaction with large, maybe less regulatory, but certainly interaction with large companies. And Wally, you certainly talked about large companies as well. So can the three of you talk a little bit about how you think about managing, both demonstrating your technology and benefits, and then sort of managing that interaction with large partners, and maybe starting with you, Marc-André?
Yes, absolutely. When we start 5 years ago, I must say that my engineering degree and my law degree served well because it was as a regulatory issues as an engineering issue. Now it's all dissipate 2 weeks ago. The regulation changed 2 weeks ago in regard of vehicle to grid integrations. So now utilities and new FERC order from a federal levels, it's also from California levels. It's completely not only legal, but is basically enforced and proposed to be deployed over California and all over North America. So I must say on this part, having you ask me that question about 3 weeks ago, I will have to say, yes, we have to go into a very difficult regulation process. Now, all changed since the last 2 weeks, and we're very happy for it. So that's the partnership with the car, then it's also something we have to manage. Also, something changed very quickly. Two car manufacturers, Nissan and Mitsubishi, allowed their car to do vehicle to grid now as is. So now it's allowed, and we have a partnership with utilities that's going to be announced eventually. We are under DA that's starting in 2021. More than 6 other OEM EV manufacturers are going to announce that their car going to support that vehicle to grid, vehicle to home integrations. So for us, I think it's because the consumer demands. It's all go down to a single point. People wanted it to happen. And that's for the OEM EV manufacturers and the grid to change their regulation. So for us now, the path just opened in front of us. We're more than pleased. It was a big bet. It can have been really a regulatory nightmares. Now it's starting to really open. But I think that the fundamental point 2 years ago was to convince those partners that this is what is important for their customers. That's what people want, homeowner wants. And this is really where they start to listen when they see the peer pressures. That's from our point of view here.
Great, thank you. Kostya, I see you took your mute off, so you seem ready to provide some perspective on this.
Yes, of course. So to second what Marc-André is saying is that although our convincing work was slightly different, not from the regulation perspective, but from convincing potential customers that what we are saying is in fact true and is feasible to achieve. I see the dynamics are changing right now, and we definitely have more interest, maybe from the perspective of electrification became more common. People see the future, and at the same time, I think we've been around for much longer with some more claims and demonstrations that what we were able to present. So the communication with larger players became easier. We have a number of largest players on the market today, what we're doing right now, currently active pilot projects with. And maintaining those relationships, well, we need to wait and see, but so far I see a lot of positive response and feedback from one of the largest car manufacturers in the world, as well as the largest battery cell manufacturers in the world that are extremely interested in our work. I don't know if that answers the question. How to maintain those relationships? It's really it's the delivery of the promised results.
Yeah. And definitely there's massive tailwinds right now in electrification. Certainly the public markets are currently in love with electrification. So there's certainly a lot of enthusiasm and accelerated development, I think, that we're seeing as well.
And you know, if you talk about electrical vehicles, for example, obviously Tesla is winning by a huge margin. And we can see other car manufacturers, although they've been around forever and ever and ever with huge brands, starting to become underdogs in the electrification. And they are trying to do all that they can possibly do, add any possible features into their cars to potentially be able to catch up to Tesla or any other players out there. And we see a lot of inbound from those players coming in. Hey, you know, let's throw in fast charging, or let's throw in better batteries. Let's do something. Let's just catch up. So we see there's one point, as you said, is the world is shifting towards electrification, and another one is the ones that are losing are trying to desperately catch up with any potential features that they can possibly add. So which works in our benefit at the moment. Hopefully, they really see us as not just a feature, but solving a pain point, but nevertheless, as a startup, it does help us with the inbound traffic and the potential customers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Wally, you touched on this a little bit already in our discussion about how you were so capable in terms of being getting commercial contracts so early, but I don't know if you have more you want to add on this point.
No, other than just kind of echo what Kostya said. Like big companies are still full of people, and it's really about building the relationships. We have large companies as our suppliers, we have large companies as our partners, and we have large customers, large companies as our customers. So really, it's just finding the right group and people and understanding their motivations such that everyone comes out with a win-win situation.
Yeah, perfect. And then maybe segueing off of that a little bit, you know, this is, a couple of you touched on this, and we were sort of talking about it as we were assembling for the panel, but this is obviously a super unusual year. Everybody is sheltered in place, and that's made some things more challenging. We're trying 48 hours virtual. It seems to be working great. But you've all mentioned maybe that sort of fundraising is more difficult in this environment because obviously the border is closed. So as you think about kind of what you want to accomplish and then the challenges maybe of 2020, how can this audience help? What are you looking for? What would be ideal to be coming out of 48 hours? Some of you have mentioned that you're raising money, or if the Stone fundraises. Obviously, commercial relationships always matter. But for me and for the audience, what kind of connections are you looking for, and what would you hope to get from your virtual time at 48 hours?
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, the pandemic has very much been challenging for us. We were ready to go out to trade shows and customers and travel right at the end of March, which is the absolute worst time. And when you say you have a holographic display, people are very interested, but of course they want to see it. So
they kind of want to see it, yeah.
Yeah, that's really been a challenge for us. Thankfully, our customers have supported us, so we're not required to raise money, even though it has sort of stunted our growth a bit. So we've pushed it off to Q1 of 2021. But really what I'm looking for out of the C100 and the possible relationships is that this is a deep tech play. Even though we're break even, we're really at the seed stage, and we are raising quite a high number. It's 20 million. So what I'm hoping for is to make those connections that can connect us to those firms and partnerships that would be willing to look at us and potentially lead around.
Yeah. And maybe I'll jump in here and we'll make this part super interactive as a dialogue, and certainly would ask people who are listening whether they have any questions on this or any other topics. But one thing I will say is venture is absolutely open for business. It's obviously a little weird right now because people are mostly working from home. But Zoom has, in the same way 48 Hours is working over Zoom, Zoom is working pretty well to keep the sort of venture business afloat, at least for initial dialoguing. You know, certainly I think sometimes you want to actually go see something, and admittedly that's maybe in the case of a holographic display a little harder to do by just strictly Zoom. But a lot of it is still upfront, you know. What's your vision? What's your technology advantage? What's your team advantage? What's your vision and what's your advantage in this marketplace? And a lot of that can still be done by Zoom. Warm intros always help because any part of the family, however that family is defined, it always does work better. So I would encourage everybody to sort of think about how to work in that dynamic. I think there was a moment where venture was like, oh crap, how is this going to work? And then it's just been kind of go, go, go. So the checkbooks are open, people are funding. It's just how to maybe optimally penetrate into now more of a virtual dialogue. So just encouragement for all of you. So Wally, thanks for sharing your perspectives on that. You know, Kostya, Mark, any additional thoughts on what you'd be seeking to, what relationships or introductions you'd be seeking for from 48 Hours?
Although we've been, or I had a few ventures that I've gone through, and even being on the mentorship session this morning already got quite a bit of experience and knowledge, where you think you kind of know stuff, but you're always open to learn. You're like a sponge. So we are right now in the midst of negotiations of a licensing deal of deploying our tech in a consumer product, and just even running that by the mentors and hearing their thoughts was super valuable. On top of talking about having pilots with car manufacturers today. And the statements, of course, they're, it's very clear and understood, but having a statement of saying, watch out, lots of people has been burned in a clean tech. They can run you to the ground with the pilots and never buy anything from you. So that wiseness, knowledge, and really experience, and of course, as Wally has mentioned, connections would really take us far. Being able preparing for the raise, getting to know you, Marianne, getting to know others on the call, and I already see some familiar names here, would really help us cross those dots and those promises what we are building to demonstrate to people what we can do, and perhaps build those relationships for either future rounds, raises, or potential collaborations.
Great, thank you, Kostya. Marc-André, any thoughts on this?
Yes, I must admit that I really love the 48 Hours in the Valley so far. For something a bit different, even though it's on Zoom, I think that's over the last 4 months, I'm on Zoom for everything. And it's always a one-on-one discussion for 30 minutes, one after another 30 minutes. And it's always unidirectionals. With 48 Hours in the Valley, I must admit that this time it's just bridging with other funders, with other CEOs that have sharing those experiences. it's really transformed my Zoom experience since the last 4 months. So I truly appreciate that. Even though it's on Zoom, we should see each other's. It's a pity, but I find the format, thanks Megan and all the teams to organize this, just chatting on Zoom about something a bit different and going a bit deeper. One of the issues with is, I find out with a corporation like us, these days, everyone do 30-minute Zoom. It's very hard to go over 250 patents, 3 books, 90 contracts, and showing all of this over 30 minutes. So I would sometimes say discussing and then they fade away. Over that, the C100, I find out a lot of people that have deep knowledge, and I truly appreciate that. So what I'm looking for is just to continue the good trend since this morning. I'm really enjoying the session so far.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for kind of sharing the perspectives. And I'd ask, people that are in the audience, to the extent that you have any sort of relevant connections or relationships, to certainly share those or share with the CEOs here. Also, and again, encourage people to put questions in the chat. Otherwise, I will keep asking. So one thing certainly that's always interesting when there's a Canadian group assembled is kind of looking at the distinct, obviously very shared culture between Canada and the US, and shared opportunities because it's very closely interlinked economies, but at the same time maybe distinctive flavors to each. So you each founded your companies in Canada, have really set up major operations in Canada, but are obviously looking for commercial opportunity and support in the US. How do you think about relative advantages? Maybe it's non-issue, right? Like maybe it's just all the same and it's just one North America. But what do you think about this? Is it all the same? Is it just one city in sort of a fairly unified North America? Or do you think of any structural advantages or differences in Canada?
I probably say for us, we're working more and more with European automakers and utilities. And so Montreal, speaking en français and in English, being 6 hours from the European country and 6 hours from California, we're kind of in the between. And
in the perfect zone.
Exactly, and we have the both legal system, right? The common law and the civil codes for the European country. We find out that Montreal is very interesting for us in that regard. I'm not talking about the money exchange rates also, that can be helpful sometime. But for us, it's as trying to develop on 2 continents at once, because our technology, it's very global. It makes sense for us. It's a big advantage.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. We're even more east of Montreal. So my previous company, we had plenty of customers in Europe, and it was nice that they were only either 3.5 or 4.5 hours away, whereas our customers in Japan were 12 hours away. So that was a little difficult sometimes. But Canada has huge advantages. Obviously, the exchange rate, but also the lower cost of living, lower labor rates. Newfoundland is among the lowest in Canada in terms of comparison of costs, even though Memorial University is the largest university in Atlantic Canada, and we have a great stable of grads that we bring in. But we also bring in people from around the world. We've got people from Europe, we've got people from the US who've come up here, and other parts of Canada. So we're really unique in the way that we can offer quite a good experience for our workers. We're generally lower cost, and we also, of course, can avail of federal programs that help leverage those investment dollars and get us that much further.
Yeah, no, Wally, I noticed that you had mentioned that before, that you were taking advantage of some of those federal programs that can be super helpful to startups. Kostya, your thoughts on this?
Similar. Canada cost of living, salaries, federal programs, provincial programs, non-dilutive government funding, especially for deep tech, for something that takes a while, years to develop, is just absolutely incredible. As I mentioned before, we raised about $3 million. We leveraged about $7 million of non-dilutive funding. Not that we're, of course, we're taking advantage of the system, but we're taking it for a good cause, we believe.
Right.
So,
yeah. Areas
we
they want to invest in,
talent.
right? Those are areas that the government is encouraging and trying to develop investment in.
Yeah. So talent is fantastic. Retention of the talent is absolutely incredible in comparison to the Bay Area. So all in all, other than the January and February timeframe, when I used to go for the meetings in the Bay Area, other than that, I mean, everything is absolutely fantastic. We love the place. We love the environment here. So encourage more people to come here and work with us. And who knows, with the election, maybe we'll see the inflow.
Well, hopefully there won't be a massive influx away from the U.S. But certainly when you talk about immigration, that has been something that has been, I think, a hot topic in Canada and the U.S. That Canada has been, I think, very welcoming of immigrants and educated tech immigrants in particular, where that has become a much harder issue in the U.S. So that we've certainly seen in Canadian circles in the U.S. and I think much more broadly just in the U.S. At large, that there is a battle for global talent, and that you have to compete for that global talent, and local tech ecosystems are part of that, education is part of that, cost of living is part of that, sort of immigration policy is part of that, and that balance is certainly something that seems to be strong now for Canada.